Barber here at Ruthmere for another tea time, and I hope you guys all have your piping hot tea ready to join us. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of a demonstration on how to make a face mask with our Exhibits and Facilities Coordinator, Paige Irwin. We are in, as of right now, the maid's quarters in our little sewing room here, which is a very appropriate setting for this. And of course, Paige has her tea right over here. And with that, I will go ahead and let Paige take it away.
Hi everyone, this is Paige, and today we are going to be starting off with a simple face mask. Now, a lot of tutorials are popping up on YouTube. We actually found this one on YouTube through a nurse. So we are going to do a simple one that is easy to sew for any beginner, and it can be done sewn by hand. So if you don't have a sewing machine, this can be done just as simply as well. So you're going to need a few materials, and some of the materials first, you're going to need 3 pieces of fabric. So you're going to want 1 for your top layer, and then 2 for your inner layer. Now you could use other pattern fabric. I'm using solid, and that just helps you differentiate, make a difference in which side goes against your face and which is on the outside. So you eliminate contamination there. You're also going to need cord for your tie. This is a tieable face mask, so it's going to tie behind the back of your head and loop around your neck. That's going to create less pressure on your ears while you're wearing it if you have to wear it for a long period of time. You can use macrame cord. We have black macrame cord here. You can make your own through fabric, or you can even cut up t-shirts. Once this is pulled, this will actually turn into kind of a rope-like. So if I pulled like this, see how it curls up on itself and creates a great cord for your masks, and it will stay in place too. You are also going to need, of course, something to cut with. I'm using fabric scissors here, and those are recommended. You'll need a ruler as well and a marking tool. And any kind of marking tool is fine. You can use a pencil or chalk. I have a chalk pencil right here that is specifically used for sewing, so I can erase it later. You can also use your pins, binder clips, or like I have here, quilter's clips to secure your fabric while sewing. I use binder clips because I find them easier to use. And of course, if you're going to be sewing by hand, you will need an extra needle and some thread. But of course, if you have a sewing machine, definitely use that sewing machine. It will help make everything go much faster. The last thing is actually wire. And this is an optional piece, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started with constructing the piece. Now, the first thing you actually want to work with is the 2 inner pieces here. And this you're going to want to line up evenly on every edge and then fold your lengthwise. And this is a piece of 10" by 8" fabric. You're going to want it to be longer across the top so that it crosses the entirety of your face. When I fold this over, I'm going to line it up edge to edge and then just make a simple light crease. What that's going to do is create a small visible crease in your fabric right down the middle of the piece. And if you can see that there, we're actually going to use that as a guide in order to mark out 3 inches on each side. So I will go ahead, place this here on the edge, try to get it lined up as neatly as possible, and go to your 3" mark. And I'm going to go ahead and use my pencil because I'm using white fabric, so I want to be able to see my mark. And just go ahead and mark just a small mark right there. Now, a pencil can be erased on fabric, though it is going to be a little bit harder. So I definitely recommend colored chalk. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this over and do this on the other side as well. So again, we'll line up right to the edge, across our crease, and mark at that 3 inches. So you're gonna have a gap in the middle about this wide and your 3-inch marks. Since I don't have a sewing machine here, I'm actually going to show you a finished piece I have. We're gonna set this aside here, and I will pull that out here, and it's going to look a little something like this. So, nothing too hard. You're gonna have your visible stitch down each side here. Now, if you're using a sewing machine, you're going to want to back stitch on each of the edges in order to make sure that this does not fray or fall apart while people are wearing it. If you're hand sewing, using a running back stitch is the best stitch to use because it is nice and strong. When you're done sewing these lines in here, what you're going to do is actually, I'm going to turn it here, and this piece that is facing me, this bottom piece, you are going to fold up, and you're just going to fold up the first layer. And this is how you're going to create your pocket. I'm going to flatten it here, and if I had an iron here with me, this is when I would press it so that that seam is nice and crisp. And then you're going to repeat that process. You're going to flip it over from top to bottom, use that bottom first layer, and fold it up again. And the reason I'm folding it away from myself rather than towards myself is because this gives it a nicer crease. And so everything will lay nice and flat when your mask is finished. So what that did was create a pocket right there. So that is going to be your inner part of your face mask. And this will be your filter pocket. So once we do that, we're actually going to take our top piece of fabric here, and I'm going ahead and using this blue fabric. You're going to set it actually right side up. So your print is facing towards you, up towards you. And when you do that, you're going to set your pocket on top. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set this one aside here and show you another one I made. And this isn't optional, but what I did was actually top stitch down this pocket. You'll notice that it has a stitch on either side all the way along. That flattens your pocket there. It makes it a little bit nicer when you're wearing it against your face. So it's not going to gap or move on you or rub against your cheeks or anything like that. So this piece I will put on top here. If you were using a patterned fabric, you would want to have right sides together. So your face mask top would be facing up towards you, and your pocket filter would be facing down. Because I'm using regular one solid color, it doesn't really matter which side I'm going to put it on. But what we would do was then mark and clip these two fabrics together. Just like you did with the pocket filter pieces, you want to make sure this is lined up as evenly as possible. I'm going to go ahead and use these binder clips, and I only have a couple, so I'll just show you where I would place this. I would actually place it one on each corner here. So I'm going to place here, and then again on this side. And this is how I like to do it because it holds it nice and neat. I would also place one on the middle of the seams here because that's going to be your bulkiest part of the fabric. And you want to make sure that is nice and flat so that you don't have any troubles when sewing over it. You could also use pins, again, or clips, or even paper clips if you don't have any of these at home. So you can really get creative with it, and it's very, very simple to use. But from there, with this piece, you would actually want to mark out 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come in here with my ruler, and I would want to mark all the way around this piece, but I'm going to just mark one mark here, and that is going to be 1/4 right here. And about 1/4 is where you're going to want to sew all along the edges here. This is going to sew your piece together. And we use 1/4 because it gives us a little bit more room to have a larger face mask. You're not going to make your face mask too small that way. When that is done, you'll take it to your sewing machine or hand sew it, and it will look a little bit something like this. So this is all sewn together. I actually sewed it with my face mask on top here. So you can see that contrasting thread, and that is about as far as we sewed in. So the next part of this is actually to turn it. But before we turn it, we're actually going to do something that helps making the turning a little bit easier. And that is actually cutting the corners. This eases the fabric. And so cutting the corners, you're going to want to cut on a diagonal and not touch or clip the stitching you have already made. So I'm going to line up and I'm going to cut here. I'm going to do that for all 4 of my corners here. And this makes it so that your corners are not bulky. If you have bulky corners, they're going to be rounded rather than nice and sharp. And so this helps, again, ease that fabric. One thing I also like to do, because again, it helps with that bulk, is actually just trim down these sides as well. And if you were making, you can adjust these measurements. If your kids want to make different crafts, you can always allow more fabric and then trim it down like I'm doing here. It makes it a little bit easier for beginner sewers. So we'll just continue cutting here. That'll be nice. About that. And one more side to Alrighty. So now that this is all trimmed up, I'm going to turn this. Now, some sewers know that when you turn something, you usually leave a gap in whatever seam you have just made. But because we have a pocket on the inside, we're actually just going to turn it from here. So turning is just simply turning the piece inside out. So this may take a little bit of time. When you first start doing it, it can be a little bit tricky, especially when you're wanting to make something nice and crisp. So what I recommend, especially because it is hard to do the corners by just using your fingers. There are tools that are made for this. They're corner turners. I have a bone tool that is used for folding paper right next to me. It looks a little something like that. But if you don't have a specialized tool or something like that, you can actually just use the back of a pencil with an eraser. You don't want to use the tip of the pencil because that could accidentally break your seams and rip the fabric. So I'm just going to take my bone tool and push up this way so I have a nice sharp point. And this is important because the next step to this is actually ironing this piece. You want to iron and press flat this piece to go on and finish the rest of your mask. Let me do this last corner here, and then I will bring out my next piece. So it's going to look a little something like this before you iron it. And you notice that I still have a little bit of a curve on my corner, so I could just bring in my tool and just kind of poke around and poke that corner out. So that is your next piece. Now, of course, once you iron it down, it's going to look much neater. And it's going to look something like this. You notice how the corners are much sharper. It's nice and flat. You'll also notice that I already do have a crease on this side. This is how you're going to attach your cording. And we're going to make a channel here that you can string your cording through. So on my front side, you can do it either front or back. I have a mark here. This mark is about 3/4 inches in. So I'll show you right here. About 3/4 right there. So once you mark on both sides, which I'm actually going to mark here, and I know it is blue on blue, so it is a little bit hard to see here. But any kind of ruler works here as well. And let me just do our 3/4 mark in and mark it all the way down using the guidelines I have here on this sewing ruler. Sewing rulers are always good because they have this extra grid and it helps you line up the edges of your fabric so you have a nice even line or cut or whatever you are doing on the process. So now that we have our 2 3/4 inches here, we're going to turn it back over, and you would go back to your iron here to fold in and crease this edge. Now this is going to create your channel. There's going to be enough room that your cord can go through. I always sew my channels without the cord inside of it because of the bulk. It's very hard to run underneath a sewing machine. And to actually help a little bit of that bulk on the face mask, we're going to do one more thing before we pin it. And that is actually take the corner of your piece, fold it in just before your crease, your 3/4 crease. And when you do that, when you fold it over, you'll notice, let me kind of turn this around here, that you'll have a little bit of extra room here on the top of the mask. That makes sure that this kind of forms to your face better than it would if this piece with all this bulk was sitting here at the top. It would leave it kind of standing straight up. And you want to do that for every corner. I'm just going to do it here on this piece. So we're going to fold over just before that crease, fold over, and fold once more. Now, it's a little tricky sometimes when you want to pin things. I'm actually going to use these binder clips, or these quilter's clips now, and just kind of slide them on. So that way it holds down my piece. And quilter clips are nice because they actually do have measurements on them as well. So it helps you kind of guide your sewing a little bit. So once that is done, the next thing to do on each side is to sew 1/8 of an inch in on this edge. Sewing such a small amount in will actually help it keep from flapping up, and that won't rub against your face then. So again, it's for comfort. And you would sew each side up, and you would get something like this. So that is really the kind of finished product for your face mask. You'll see that we have our 2 channels. And for cording, what I like to do is actually take a safety pin, pin it to the edge or the end of your cord, and string it through this channel so that it's easy enough to move through. You'll loop it at the bottom of the face mask and bring it back up through the top. So your bottom of your face mask would go around the back of your neck, and the top of the face mask would tie at the top of your head. That way you have no ear strain there. There is one more optional thing to do for these face masks, and it is very helpful, especially if you decide to donate to your local communities or to your hospitals, and that is using wire. Now I have right here is floral stem wire, and this is covered in a cloth. And you want to make sure that your wire is either bare or it is cloth covered. You do not want paper covered wire. And that is because the paper can break down. It's a little bit harder to use there, and it won't last as long. So I would cut a piece of this about 6 or 7 inches long for this mask. And what I would want to do is actually take that piece and push it up through the pocket all the way up until you hit the edge of the top of the mask. But because that will not stay there, you actually want to top stitch, just like we did across the pockets, to the top of the mask. That will keep a channel that will allow your wire to stay firmly in place, and you can then bend it over your nose and form it to your face. And so that is how to make a simple mask. Now these masks, depending on your skill level, can take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. They're a great thing to do with family. You can kind of create an assembly line with people cutting and sewing, and it's a great way to bond with the people who are in your house. You can buy all these materials online. It's best that you do buy online to practice safe social distancing. And again, you want 100% cotton or quilter's cotton. And quilter's cotton is just a highly woven cotton. When you pull up a single piece of this fabric, let me pull one out here, you want to make sure that when you put your hand underneath it, you cannot clearly see your hand. So this is a perfect example. You cannot see the outline of my hand or the details of my hand. If that's all you have, it's better to make these masks than to not, because it helps prevent spread, and that is the most important thing right now. Now, there are different types of masks. If you want to do your research on YouTube, a lot of nurses are making YouTube videos that allow you, that tell you really what they want and what they prefer. Not only do we have a lot of these very simple masks here, I do have a couple kinds that we have been making for the hospital my family has. One of these is called an Impulsive Mask, and none of these do have ties in them right now because they were made so that they could either tie them or put elastic in them. But an Impulsive Mask has a filter pocket, a little bit different than the one we have. It actually goes all the way through, if you can see that there. And these help cover the PPE, the protection equipment that the nurses and doctors are getting at the hospitals. It is a little bit more formed to the face. It goes under the chin and over the nose very tightly. And these are some of what a lot of hospitals want. But another kind is to actually make these masks, which are folded. These are pleated masks. When you put them on, you want to make sure that they are fully unfolded. And the way you put on the mask is you take by the ear straps, you are going to hold it up to your face and then strap over one ear, strap over the other, make adjustments, and pinch your wire down. And that is how to correctly wear a mask. And when you take it off, you want to grab by the ears and pull off, making sure not to touch the mask. That's the most important thing, as to not contaminate them. So one other thing that I would like to talk about is actually this piece right here. And if you are not into sewing, or if you're into crochet more, what this is a Facemask Extender. So it is just a simple row of double crochet and buttons on each end. They loop over the elastics so that this can stay on the back of the head rather than around the ears, and that would cause stress. So these are also greatly appreciated and donated to different hospitals or communities. So every little bit helps, and if you want to go ahead and make any of those, I highly recommend getting a hold of local officials and hospitals and seeing what they need, and this would be a great way to start.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Paige. That was very insightful, very helpful. As I'm sure many of you know, CDC guidelines are recommending that even if you are asymptomatic, that you are wearing a mask, especially when you are in public spaces. So even if you're not making these to donate, we still do recommend that you find a way to make them for yourselves and for your family. If you don't have access, I'm still working with a bandana here myself. But okay, thank you guys so much for joining us. Next week, our next tea time will be with me. I'm going to be doing some Elkhart history trivia that you guys get to participate in. So it's going to be a little bit more interactive. So thank you so much, and you guys have a great day.